The content in this podcast may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Alright, we got this.
Okay.
So you and I, we're going to have a little battle, a little debate.
A debate?
Yeah,
no, not a debate.
Yeah,
I don't like when you phrase it like that.
I want to convince you my perspective on Shutter Island.
Okay.
All right, but you can start with
The only class I ever failed in my life was speech and debate. So if that tells you anything about how much I love debating.
Was it the speech part or the debating part?
It was the part about getting up in front of the class.
Showing up.
I'm good to be argumentative, but I don't really want to do it in front of 30 other people. So yeah, I didn't love that class. I called out sick every time.
Everybody always said imagine everybody's naked, but I'm like, why? That'd just be more weird.
I'd be looking at the
that's not gonna help at all.
No.
Make me feel all awkward.
Totally.
But not really debate.
Right.
So it's more of like a
discussion.
Okay. Shutter Island.
Yeah.
I'd say one of my favorite movies.
It's a great movie. I don't know if it's a favorite for me, but it's a good movie.
I don't know. I love the movies that you can kind of discuss different endings.
Yeah.
Anything that's kind of up to interpretation, I feel like makes the movie last a lot longer. I know when we worked at Harkins, I don't know if you were working at that time, but it was around the time that Inception came out.
No, probably not.
So do you remember Inception?
Mm-mm.
So Inception was the one where, again, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay.
It's they can incept or put an idea in somebody's head by using this technology to basically invade their dreams and their subconscious while they're sleeping.
That sounds familiar, but...
And so they can it's the whole concept is that they can keep going into different levels of the dream. So they can go to a dream within a dream within a dream.
Okay. It sounds oddly familiar. And if I did see it, I probably really wasn't
the ending
in it.
The ending of that movie was one of those ones where he had people brought tokens with them when they went into a dream. And it was a way to remind themselves that they're in a dream. Okay. And so in the movie, Leonardo DiCaprio's little token is this top. And so he spins this top, and if it continues to spin and doesn't fall, he's in a dream. But if it falls, it's real life. But so it's the very end of the movie, he spins the top, and then the screen cuts to black after it just wobbles a tiny bit. And so it kind of just leaves people to interpret and kind of really deep dive to look to see if he's in the dream or not.
Okay.
But those are just the kind of debates, the long-winded debate or description that I like to get into. Yeah,
you might have lost me for a second there. I was wait, are you comparing that to Shutter Island?
Just the style of...
kind of films DiCaprio makes? Oh
not necessarily that he makes, but just films in general that leave this much speculation.
Right.
So the object of what we want to get to, and spoiler alert, but at this point, if you haven't seen this movie, I don't think I'm really spoiling much.
Yeah, this movie's been out for a minute. So.
Yeah. But basically, the object of the movie is Leonardo DiCaprio is investigating this island in the 50s, and it's a mental asylum, and they have a missing patient. Basically, at the end, he ends up being one of the patients, and they said it was an elaborate ploy to just convince him before he was lobotomized. But the two big theories are, one, they were able to successfully convince him that he was insane, and two was that he was always insane, and this was just a whole ploy or a whole act.
It's interesting when you rewatch the movie and you try to look at it from a different point of view. Because because I think the first time I saw that movie obviously was a long time ago, and I haven't really watched it much since. So rewatching it, I was like, oh, there's definitely a lot of little Easter eggs in there that I missed the first time I watched it.
When you pay attention and you actually like really deep dive into a movie, you're looking at everything, especially if you're like trying to prove your theory.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I'm on the side more of it's pretty easy to convince you he was delusional.
Mm-hmm.
But the theories are awesome. And I was talking to a social worker the other day that said she had her students do papers on this movie.
Yeah. It's widely used in a lot of classes use it as kind of a project paper. I know I did mine in my Psychology 101. I did it about kind of what mental diagnosis I would have given a patient with his features. And
what did you say?
I said it was like DID, and I don't remember if my teacher had corrected me from DID to just dissociative disorder.
That is what that is.
Okay.
Dissociative identity disorder.
Yeah, the difference between where it's not split personality, but it's more of just dissociation. Like they see things visually differently, and they'll kind of have delusions. I don't really.
That's interesting because dissociative, yeah. Well, interesting.
But I always like to go back and like try to rewatch the movie and convince myself of the other theory. When you go into watching these movies, you generally already have an idea of what you're looking for. But if you play like a little game and you're like, well, I'm going to convince myself that I'm wrong, so I'm going to watch the movie with this mindset, it kind of, I think, can go 50-50 on this movie.
Well, I think the first time I did watch it, I think I was confused at the end. And obviously, unlike you, I'm not super attention to detail until I've watched the movie a few times, and then you end up picking up all the little things. But yeah, I think the first time I watched it, I was definitely confused. Like this, I think, was the first time I had watched it that the ending was clear to me. Mm-hmm. Because again, I watched it however many years ago it came out. What year did it come out?
I don't remember.
I mean,
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah. Because I'm like, I think I definitely watched it when it came out, but I don't remember being like conclusive about the ending. So 2010. Okay. So 14 years ago for me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For both of us?
Yeah. So I was what? 16?
Yeah, 16. I would have been just turning 16.
Yeah. So I definitely was not, I wasn't into the mental health thing at that point. I didn't know anything about mental health. And I certainly didn't understand the movie. Because again, rewatching it today, I was like, oh, and just going through the movie, I was like, he clearly has PTSD from the war. Mm-hmm. And then he drowns not drowns, but his wife drowns his kids, mm-hmm. and he kills his wife. So now he's got another set of PTSD from that. And his personality just fractures. And like, I can see that now, but I wasn't going to see that at 16.
Yeah, at 16, when you're watching it, you're not really like concluding that there's a different or deeper meaning to the ending. Unless it was super prevalent in social media. I don't think we ever really thought movies had different meanings.
Yeah.
Like we kind of heard growing up, I know everybody heard about like little Disney innuendos that they would pop into like the old posters.
Right.
And so we always saw it as Easter eggs, but I don't think there were a lot of movies where we really had to interpret the ending.
No. I think, and again, I had such a limited allowed amount of TV mm-hmm. per week. So if I watched something, like I really had to, I had to want to watch it because I didn't have a lot of TV time. So
had to make a lot of effort to make it happen.
So, it's kind of like one of those where I probably would have wanted to rewatch it to like really understand it, but I wasn't going to because I wanted to see whatever the next thing was.
The perspective starts, I'd say, like right off the bat, the beginning, the very first scene, he's on the boat or the little ferry. And it's just like, you can already assume so much based off those very first few scenes.
Right.
Because if you're going down the road that he was a marshal and he was actually investigating this place and became an experiment, you can really look at the fact that there's a lot of some angst and mystery between the partners themselves, because Leonardo DiCaprio even said in the movie he had never met this partner before. So this was like the first time they were meeting.
Right.
And he tests them kind of throughout the movie too. If you ever hear him ask like how the weather was in certain areas. I think he always says Portland. And then the guy keeps saying that he's from like Portland, but he's like, oh yeah, how's the weather out in Boston? Something along those lines. He's testing the weather, and he keeps going back to see if he changes up his story.
Interesting.
So like he asks him right away. Yeah, because if he's like, oh yeah, it's great, then he was gonna like go, okay, well, I had asked you this earlier. Why did you give me a different answer?
Well, I think so my initial point of view was, at the beginning, you see DiCaprio talking with, what's his name, Chuck? Mm-hmm. And I didn't think much of it. At this time, I'm like, okay, from a beginner's point of view, he's a marshal. He's coming to investigate. He has this partner he doesn't know, and he's skeptical. Mm-hmm. As most, I think, cops, I think most people in those high authority roles are.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think much of that. But as you watch the movie, and again, the first time I watched it, I don't think I picked up on all the little Easter eggs, but it does appear like he is a marshal that's coming in to investigate. But then you notice that everyone around him is kind of weird.
So at the beginning of the movie, I really tried to pay attention to see if they were paying like particular attention to any singular person. So walking in to see if only the guards were looking at like Leonardo DiCaprio.
Right.
It seemed pretty even throughout the movie.
Yeah, it did appear as if the guards were always behind the two of them.
Yeah.
So I didn't think much of that. But as you do watch further into the movie, you notice that the guards are always more directly behind DiCaprio.
Mm-hmm. And that was one thing, again, I was trying to like sit there and to like disprove myself.
But that's the other thing is like if you were arguing for the latter, you could say
they were pretty present for them.
They were present because they were uncertain about this guy who was coming to investigate. They were, Well,
because that's supposed to be the big kick, is that he has experience with, or he kind of has a background and already knows of the place.
Right.
And so he's trying to just kind of uncover the secrets of what's going on inside.
And we know he's highly intelligent.
Mm-hmm. He's a war veteran.
Right.
Again, current marshal at that point, or ex-marshal, depending on which perspective you're looking at. But they even marked him as most violent patient that they had because of his training.
That makes sense.
But I think like the biggest thing that makes it all kind of seem weird is one, it's like who would actually put on an experiment like this to be like, hey, we have a violent inmate or a violent patient, and we've tried everything we can, but he's still violent, still has all these delusions. Let's just play along.
Have you heard about the freaking psychologists in the 50s?
No.
Because that's all they did.
But it seems, so at the end, it kind of shows that his gun was like plastic.
Yeah.
And so...
No way they were giving him a real gun.
Well, it's hard to say. That's one point that I have a really hard time defending. Because if he actually... Because he was delusional, thought he had a real gun at the end... And it was fake, but he's yelling and he's like, I can feel the weight difference. And he's like, this gun's loaded. And it's like a fake gun.
Oh, so he's really delusional.
Yeah, so, but at that point too, you really can't blame that on the medications, because they're trying to say that the medications are making him hallucinate and giving him all these problems. And when he meets up with the real Rachel Solando out in that cave, she keeps saying that, yeah, have you been smoking your own cigarettes? Have you taken any medications that they have? And he's like, oh shit, yeah, I have. And so he keeps going that it's psychotropic drugs.
Right.
And they're like, within 72 hours, they can start taking effect. So he had been there long enough for that to say if they had drugged him from the very first time that they gave him a cigarette, that was the ferry.
Yeah. I don't know how many psychotropic drugs make you go delusional, but usually
Who really knows what they had in the 50s, though?
That is true. They were trying to lobotomize, so yeah.
But so that's like...
Such an interesting time of life.
That's like the big reason why I'm like, well, it makes more sense, and it kind of makes you question that, oh, maybe he's not a patient. Because it's such an elaborate...
Well, and the psychologist, or that's what the guy is, right? The head guy. He's just odd. Like, throughout the entire film, no matter which perspective you're taking, he's a weird guy.
Yeah, he always seems a little off.
He seems a little off. And you can't tell if it's like he's weary because... Or is that the word?
Yeah,
wary. If he's wary because he's being investigated and he's doing something he shouldn't be, or is he anxious because he's a really dangerous patient?
There are some parts that I tried to like really really pay so much attention this last time. It's like in the very beginning when he's asking for records. He seems very defensive of wanting to give records, and I can see it from both sides. Like, one, if you're being investigated, you don't really want to give up the information.
Right.
And then the other side would be, if he's a patient, are you really going to give him other patient information? Even if it's...
Yeah, that is odd.
Even if it's like this big experiment to avoid lobotomizing somebody, I feel like they would still keep patient information safe.
Well, and even when he was interviewing the one patient, I was like... talking to you, and I was like, that's really odd. I was like, you're going to tell me that people at a psych ward essentially are going to play along with delusions? Like, half of those people are too, like, if they're there and this is truly the worst of the worst, most of those people are not going to play along with this. Like, what? Well,
that's why. So he only really interrogated the two, and the first one was the lady that seemed completely sane. She just had killed her husband.
Yeah, I mean,
so of course,
guess, yeah. But
then of course, maybe he only asked her because she was like the most stable.
But then why is she there?
Because it's a plant. If it's all set up to like start, like it's multiple ways. If you're looking at it as he's a patient, it's a plant. You know, they're getting somebody that they can interview that's not super delusional, that's not going to freak out or just kind of give it away right off the bat.
See, that's what's odd though.
But she didn't get weird until he asked about Andrew Latus.
And then she got noticeably anxious.
But if he is Andrew Latus, then yeah, it'd probably be weird to be like, if you have anything going on, if somebody asked, who am I? Like, I'm looking for me, basically.
Yeah, it's
like, would you kind of be like, oh, yeah, I don't know how to respond to that. I need to go.
Well, and she did write in the notebook and hand over to him, run.
Yeah. And so because if he's a patient, it's like twofold. Run because they're going to get you here, or run because this is the only chance you have to get out of here.
Yeah. And honestly, no matter how you look at it, he was never getting out of there.
That was the whole point that like Rachel Solando said. She said, you lost your chance to get out of there. Because he interviewed that other guy that he had apparently as a patient had beaten up. And everything that he had said to Chuck from the beginning of the movie about how he found out about the place, that other guy's story corroborated.
Really?
Yeah, but then when the doctor or the psychologist is explaining what had happened, it really, if you rewatch that talk he has with the guy in Ward C, it fits both perfectly. Like, if you go in with the mindset that he's a patient, it's just like, yeah, he's telling like, yeah, it's always been about you because he is Andrew Latus. It's always this test that they keep running.
Right.
And so that conversation really works for both perspectives because it matches both. And so it's crazy to think even just the directing like prowess of getting that shot done.
So many of them, because there's so many instances in the movie where it can be applicable to both.
Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to think of like the really big like dead giveaways, the things that you have a hard time being like, okay, this one thing came up and it's like kind of convinces me. What is it for you that you would say is like the most important scenes that back up him being a patient?
Oh, I would say the fact that they gave him medication for his supposed migraine and he went to sleep, and that was the first time I was like, okay, they gave him something. Like, you don't take migraine medication and go to sleep.
But he seemed a little off when he was having the migraine. Like it had never happened before.
That's true.
And so I think somebody that normally is prone to migraines would probably know, like, oh shit, I'm having a migraine.
Well, and you do notice when the patient that he's interviewing is drinking the glass of water, when she brings the supposed cup to her lips, there's no cup in her hands. Yeah,
and so for a while I thought that was just like a movie mistake.
Right, no.
But it doesn't make enough sense, especially for like this level of director, to miss something like that. Because there's no cup in her hand, but she's bringing her hand to her mouth like there's a glass in it.
Well, and the idea of that is that he has PTSD about the water, so he can't see water.
Yeah, his children have been drowned by his wife.
But what's odd is that if you're going to look at it from the point of he was delusional with DID, right? PTSD, his personality was so split, so fractured, that he had PTSD for something that never actually happened. Because when you notice that Chuck is always lighting the cigarettes for him in the beginning of the movie, he has PTSD about fire. But what's odd is his wife didn't actually die in a fire.
No, he thinks in his mind, he basically put that his wife had died in the fire.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So he literally
as a patient, he shot his wife.
But he had PTSD about something that didn't happen. That's
because he was having visions of the wife burning, right?
Yeah.
With, like ash on her back or whatever.
Yeah. There's pictures of it, yeah.
Yeah. But then it was like weird too, because when they had the first Rachel Solando that popped up, like she was popping up in his visions as like his wife. Like in place of his wife. Like you remember, it was kind of weird. And so at first...
Was that in place of his wife though? Or was that just...
Yeah, because it changed. Like the little girl still popped up. His daughter still popped up. With Rachel Solando. And then he had also had visions already or delusions of his wife too. So it was weird. Because it had shown both people there.
Okay.
And so I'm like, is it because Rachel Solano was like asking him or like inferring that he looked like her husband?
Or maybe he was reimagining a different life. I don't know.
So
because it's odd too that his daughter was in it, but his other kids weren't.
Yeah, and that one was odd just because it doesn't really make sense why Rachel Solando was in his dreams.
Right.
But it's just like that. I liked the aspect of they're like all playing along with the who is number 67 or something. And somebody does make a comment about an earlier note that he had gotten was the law of 4.
Okay.
And one of the guards, like you hear a part where one of the guards is like, oh, you had the law of 4. I love that. And it's like, almost seems as if it kind of corroborates more the thought that he was a patient. Because if he's been going and reverting back to these delusions every single time and keeps going on about this whole thing, like, yeah, the guards have probably all heard like the rule of 4 before.
Right.
So that's like one scene that like really corroborates that it's kind of just a big act. Because they like the guard can't contain the fact that he's like, oh, I love that. I love that one. That one's funny.
Interesting. I don't think I noticed that part.
I was like ultra paying attention.
I was going to say, I think...
I was like looking at like socks. And
where was I?
I was like, his socks are miscolored.
Yeah, you do notice like every little piece of movies. Yeah, so I don't think I noticed that part, but oops.
Yeah, so for me, honestly, though, I think I'm really convinced that he was a patient. As much as like I play around with the ideas and I try to convince myself otherwise, it's just really hard because of his acceptance. And if he was a patient, the ending of the movie was a lot better.
Yeah.
Because it kind of gives him that like freedom where he's like, okay, now I'm making my own choice and I'm going to die and I get lobotomized just to be free.
That's crazy though. And that was actually kind of sad.
Yeah, it was sad because he knows that they had, I mean, I think they finally broke him with that big act because it was kind of like their last ditch effort, their Hail Mary to be like, if this can fix you and make you nonviolent and stop like having you revert back to this Teddy Edwards or Edward Daniels character,
then it's like, then you can just live the rest of your life. But he couldn't live with the regret of killing his wife and his kids where he blamed himself.
Yeah.
So he couldn't live with that.
That makes sense.
But at the very end, he's just like, yeah, is it better to live like the delusion or die a good man? Or is it, what is it? Like, yeah, die as a good man or live as the monster?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think with him being the patient, it has more of a meaning in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it could have a meaning either way. Because either way, his life was traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about that. So I don't think that most people would go through the events he went through and come out of it squeaky clean.
Especially not going to somewhere like Dachau.
Yeah, no. So it makes sense why he was the way he was either way.
Yeah. No, it's a good movie, though. I really like this movie.
It's one of the better psychological thrillers.
Yeah, because it's one of those movies, too, that it's just, like, easy to go back and watch it.
Yeah.
It's got a good enough story, and it's not, like... It's got a good soundtrack.
It does.
And
it's got a lot of good actors.
Yeah, it's great actors.
Yeah.
So it's just always a good watch. I've watched it probably, like, 8 or 9 times.
Jeez.
I've seen it a lot.
You just refresh it once a year.
Every so often I get kind of on a binge where like it sounds really good or it really fits like the mood. But the other times it's just like looking for something in the background that sounds good.
It's just a good movie. DiCaprio's a good actor. Mark Ruffalo's a great actor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Mark Ruffalo's character. So he's like his doctor the whole time. So
he's psychiatrist.
His psychiatrist, his primary psych. It kind of points in line of him not really being a cop the whole time.
Yes.
Because like you were saying, like him fumbling with getting, like he took the whole holster off instead of just giving his gun.
Yeah.
So when Teddy gave just his handgun, like Mark Ruffalo's character or Chuck had to pull his full like holster out of his pants.
It's interesting that Teddy didn't catch that.
Well, he did.
Oh, he did?
He looks at him weird. We're going to have to watch it again after this.
We will have to watch it again because I definitely noticed that
he gives him like a weird look, but it kind of seems like he's already kind of questioning him from the get-go.
Well, because he's skeptical.
Well, yeah.
Which anybody in his position would be.
Yeah, but then it's like it's so hard because as much as like I usually fully 100% believe that he was the patient, it's just like if you say that the second Rachel Solando was real and she was a doctor at this ward, all they said was that she was insane, and it nullifies everything. Like you cannot argue that.
Well, that's the other thing is how did he just dream this lady up? Like who was she?
Yeah, it's because if you're saying like his delusions were that crazy, they'd be getting progressively like more and more worse.
Right, and this lady who he supposedly never had met or never knew.
Yeah, like a full-on conversation. And like, was he hallucinating all the rats too? Or all the mice?
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's odd.
Because that's what made him notice.
Bits of the movie where it's odd.
That's what made him notice the fire. And yeah, it's just like an entire person that he doesn't know. He never, like, you'd have to make up an entire face.
Yeah, that's odd to think about because someone probably wouldn't take it that far either.
Yeah, so it goes back and forth because all he says to discredit Rachel Solando is that he's hallucinating. And then everything else is just like, yeah, you know, you're a patient. Like, all they have to say is they have to go back and look at your trauma. Like, oh, you have PTSD from Dachau. Of course you're crazy. Of course you snapped.
Right. But also, back in that time, they weren't really doing a lot to...
There's no, like, suing the government and having, like, a second look, you know?
Mental health wasn't at their forefront.
Uh-huh.
It was still kind of the, like, don't cry, you got this.
Yeah, well, if you heard that you're... at that point, what would they call it? The loony bin?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you were at that point and a family member all of a sudden just ended up at the loony bin, like, I feel like everybody just kind of played the mental gymnastics to connect the dots.
Right.
You're like, oh yeah, it made sense that Jimmy is in the loony bin. You know, he's been going through all the hard times. His wife died.
They would talk so awful about people who
and they just never
had mental health
question
conditions, and they just had no empathy whatsoever for the fact that some people had it rough. And I think that a lot of the mental health practices that were happening in the 50s by a lot of like famous psychologists, a lot of it was weird, and like lobotomies were weird, and they didn't
They
prove
basically
successful
pacified
at
or
all.
killed people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean...
But I think that was kind of the point sometimes.
Well, that's what they said. They were just going to permanently make him not dangerous.
Right. So it's like either you die or you're basically a vegetable, so you can't.
It would basically like remove all higher brain function.
Yeah.
But I think the guns are a pretty good point too, because you think about it. So at the end, he snaps his gun in half. Turns out his gun's fake, and the rifle was empty. So that would mean that in that time, like they set up a guard knowing that the guard was going to get knocked out.
Interesting.
Or if they're like taking all precautions, maybe. But it's just like, why would the guard have an empty gun?
Yeah, why would the guard have an empty gun?
Because it kind of, that feels more of that, like it's just kind of a hoax. It's a big play. No, it's one big act. Give him a fake gun. Everybody around him's guns are going to be empty.
Well, right, because they're not going to give him a real gun.
But he also imagines the blood spatter.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, when he shoots the psychologist at the end, like you hear the gun sound go off, or the gunshots go off,
That's
and you see
right,
the blood
he does,
spatter against the wall, and then he turns back and it's all normal again.
Yeah. He was
So that, I
delusional.
guess, yeah, at that point you can actually, he is fully like visualizing stuff.
Yeah. Well, his wife was there with his daughter.
He's been seeing his wife the whole time.
What does it signify that his daughter was the only one that came up in any of his hallucinations?
Because it was the first one he found.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, that's what I think.
Yeah.
Or he was closer with his daughter.
Yeah, because none of the other kids pop up.
Yeah, they pop up, like he grabs their bodies, but none of them. She always kept saying like, why didn't you save me? Or why didn't you save us?
Yeah, and the mom just was bipolar.
Yeah, she was...
Major depressive, yeah.
They diagnosed her with a few things. But yeah, he'd been seeing her from like the very beginning. I don't know if it's like within like one of the very first few scenes.
So he can't let her go.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing that when he's with that conversation, or he's having that talk with the guy in C Ward, was she's like, you gotta let her go, she's gonna get you killed.
And he's like, I can't.
But then it's like, again, that one line goes both ways.
Why?
Like, because if he can't let go of his dead wife and all this stuff, like he's gonna stay in his delusions. And they're gonna lobotomize you.
Okay.
Or in that same sense, if he's saying like, yeah, you're just seeing her, you're making her up. If you keep following that, you're going to die on this island.
Interesting.
So it goes both ways.
It could go both ways.
This is the reason why I can watch this movie so many times.
I know. I feel like I got to watch it again.
You notice different things every single time.
Yeah, it's like piecing a puzzle together.
Yeah, but every single time you make
it's like something different. Yeah.
Get another piece.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but I highly recommend this movie.
Oh yeah. It's one great. Of the better, psychological.
And holds up really good quality wise, like picture wise and film wise for 14 years.
Well, and again, you can't go wrong with the actors. Like,
no.
I'm not the biggest fan of Leo, but he is a great actor.
He's great.
And I am a fan of Mark Ruffalo, and he's an amazing actor.
The thing is I don't remember them doing... I know Leonardo DiCaprio does a lot of action movies and stuff like that, but his thriller list has kind of been increasing over the time. And so it was only shortly before that Inception had came out. I don't remember which one came out first.
Yeah, I think, were those the only two real, like, thriller-ish movies he was in?
Well, I know this one was directed by, like, Scorsese.
Yeah.
And then Christopher Nolan had directed Inception.
Okay.
So both of them were, like, onto that same type of movie style. Especially with him being the main character.
I know, that's kind of like a similar...
Because I don't know if Inception came out, like, 2011.
I'll look it up.
I think 2011 sounds like 2010 or 2011. We said this one came out 2010. Or no, 2009?
2010.
Geez, so they came out the same time.
Dang, really? Yeah. That was a good year for
I didn't
Leo.
even notice that. Yeah.
Did he get a Grammy? Like,
No, he finally got his first Grammy like a few years ago.
oh, really?
Yeah.
What? That's a shame because he's an amazing actor.
Yeah, and he just never got a Grammy.
I loved him in the Titanic as Jack.
Of course you did.
I really did. I really did. That's the only reason I like the Titanic movie. Like, I can do without the whole movie. If it was just him the whole time, I'd be fine. Like, he was a very handsome young man.
All right, but thanks for tuning in. That was just a little taste and a little tidbit of a movie that we both enjoyed. Follow up on all our socials.
Goodbye.